Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of VGC Off The Record. It's Friday, the weekend is ahead of us. It's the afternoon or the evening when we put this live. That means one thing, it's time for another big old chat about all the news from the video games industry. My name is Steven McInerney, I'm your host here over on VGC Off The Record, and I'm joined by two wonderful guests. Of course, our very own boss, our big chief, Andy Robinson, is here alongside me. How are you doing today, man? You good?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good. It's Friday. Pubs are still open. They've not shut them yet.
No, give it a week.
I've been outdoors a little bit, so that cheers you up, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I know you're definitely checking your phone every 5 minutes, waiting for the inevitable Switch Pro during recording.
It does. Everything's kind of kicked up a gear, isn't it? I mean, obviously you got all the E3, whatever we're calling them, E3 Plus, if you're in gi.biz, next week. So yeah, the news cannon is firing.
The news cannon is firing. Are you catching a t-shirt today? Is that what you're going to do? Catching a big news
We're
t-shirt.
trying to catch as much news swag as we can.
I've seen those news cannons, t-shirt cannons. They killed Marge. Not Marge. Who was it? What was his missus called? Ned Vander's missus.
Oh, yeah.
Maud, that was it. Yeah. Maud. They killed Maud, so I don't trust them ever. Anyway, away from Simpsons references, I'm joined, of course, as well by the man behind the numbers over at gamesindustry.biz, Christopher Dring. How you doing, Dring? Are you good, man?
I'm good. Yeah, it's my 36th birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
I feel
to you. Andy's not going to join in, but I'll sing it.
I sang him happy birthday before the show, mate.
Did you? You definitely did on call with me.
I had all the news cannons firing.
Glitter everywhere. Nintendo Switch Pro's dropping down. What do you want for your birthday? Do you want a bit of Nintendo Switch Pro news?
I do. Hell yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about E3 because I've been given a bit. It's one of those things like I've been sort of doing little chats about E3.
Dringo is part of the E3 machine.
Are you? No way.
I'm a media partner for E3.
Nice.
I've been speaking to loads of people who've got some announcements and stuff that's going up on Games.biz. And I actually looked at the announcements and coming in as somebody who was expecting a bit of a washout for E3 because I thought the pandemic's delayed everything. It's all going to be. I actually look at what I know and I go, oh, actually, this is all right. This is. I think if you're going in expecting like the biggest E3 ever or a big E3, I think you'll be disappointed. But I wasn't. And so I'm quite excited. I don't know everything. I don't know most of it, but I look at it and go, this might be better than we thought.
I'm excited. I'm genuinely really excited for it. And of course, we will be discussing E3 in absolutely loads of detail today. Because
you can't leave Dringo there. Tell us about E3, Dringo. So
we'll get to this. I want to hear all the inside gossip.
When you say it's better than you thought, is it like better than...
Yeah, what's your level?
What E3 is it better than? Is it better than like Connect E3?
Remember the last E3 we went to, Andy? The one which was a bit rubbish. I think
it was just Cyberpunk, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
Cyberpunk
quite
and Watch Dogs.
It's
wasn't The Last of Us 2 as well revealed for that one? A bit of a
PlayStation weren't there. They ditched.
No, they weren't there. You're right. I'm thinking of.
There was Banjo in Smash. That was a big thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That. There was. I think that kind of level, which I know isn't an exciting level, but I think if you. If on my Twitter mentions, because I talk about console sales a lot, so you get fanboys in there a lot, and I get people saying to me, "E3 is going to be rubbish. Nothing's going to be announced. I might as well not bother." And I've got people expecting like every game Nintendo could possibly release or every game PlayStation could possibly announce is going to be announced. Neither of those things are happening. Right? It's somewhere in the middle, and I think as long as you keep your expectations at a certain level, and I think you'll be pleased. And that's all I'm saying.
Oh, I just need to know the level.
So basically, Metroid and F-Zero confirmed, yeah?
I don't.
2 and 3.
I don't know much about what Nintendo are planning, but if I from my history, my knowledge of Nintendo is if they've got a really massive game to show at E3, that's all they're probably going to show. Yeah, I don't expect them to announce like everything. They'll do like one if they've got one big game. If they've got 4 or 5 smaller games like they did at the last show where it was Luigi's Mansion and Zelda and stuff like that, then you'll get a spread. That's what I think. Anyway, sorry, I've derailed it. Let's go back.
No, it's fine. It's fine, man. Guys, this is VGC. This is what you get. It's a nice little teaser at the start of this podcast. Every Friday here on Off The Record, we try and deliver you guys the most considered, most informative takes on all the big stories from the world of video games. And if you're a fan of this and you're like looking at our faces, you can check us out over on YouTube every Friday or evening or afternoon. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss out on any other videos in terms of previews and all that kind of stuff and reviews as well. And if that's not your thing, you want to listen on the go, of course, you can check us out as a podcast podcast over on all the major podcast providers, so you can listen to us while you just, I don't know, do the dishes. That's what I do, by the way. I actually listen back to this show. That's dedication to the brand. As I'm doing the dishes, just to make sure, see how bad I personally was, basically, and then improve from there. But anyway, there's loads to talk about today. Of course, E3 will be high on the agenda, but these are your headlines, basically. E3 is taking shape. It's getting very real over at E3. Sony's cross-gen U-turn is going to be a big debate, and genuinely, the gloves are off in this one. It's been very interesting. Yuji Naka has fallen on his own sword, and finally, there's been a big 2K games leak. But we're going to start with the event on everyone's lips. E3 is taking place, and there's loads and loads to pull out. And I've got all these stories over on VideoGamesChronicle.com about the plans for many publishers and all that kind of stuff. But we'll start kind of roughly with the schedule. I mean, Nintendo has finally confirmed its E3 Nintendo Direct, which will take place on Tuesday, June the 15th. It'll be a 40-minute live stream. It'll start at 9 a.m. PST and focus on Nintendo Switch software, mostly, in inverted commas, releasing this year, the company has said. And immediately after the Directs, the company will stream roughly 3 hours of deep dives on gameplay for a handful of Switch games in the Nintendo Treehouse Live. And of course, who knows, there could be that Switch Pro reveal there. As well, Square Enix has dated its E3 2021 Games Showcase, which will be held on June the 13th, which will take place shortly after the Xbox and Bethesda Showcase. It'll kick off at 8:15 local UK time. The company's official announcement teased the world premiere of a new game from Eidos Montreal, which, according to Bloomberg reporter Jason Schreier, looks likely to be Eidos Montreal's Guardians of the Galaxy video game, which he said will be Square's big E3 showcase this year. And there's loads and loads more. To be honest, there's no point in me reading about every single E3 thing. We'll start initially with Andy, and it's just general excitement for E3. Obviously, we heard a little bit from Dringo there, Andy, but are you looking forward to this, man? What are you expecting from E3 this year? I guess someone just as an industry professional, are you expecting it to be relatively low key? I mean, I know Gringo's kind of set the tone.
I'm looking forward to it more than I was. I mean, they've still been. It's all come together quite slowly for those of us who aren't blessed with being a media partner. I mean, we're even still now, just a week before the event, really waiting to hear the full picture. I mean, there's a schedule out there, but there's gaps and whatnot. But yeah, it's definitely more exciting than I was expecting, right? And I'm happy about that. I'm happy about that. I'm glad that it's more condensed, and lots of different companies seem to have come to the party. So there's lots to look forward to, right? I mean, there's Ubisoft and Square Enix and obviously Nintendo and Xbox. So it should be. It should be a big one, but at the same time, it looks like it might be just not too busy for us to not have to kill ourselves, kind of covering news, which usually E3 is pretty horrific if you work in the games media, but it's nicely spread out. It looks like you can just kind of do a Saturday evening and then...
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a bit of weekend work involved.
Oh yeah, that's expected, but I thought I was going to have to block my weekend off. Yeah. I might actually be able to watch the England game at this rate.
Oh, wow.
So see what's going on. I'll have a look at I'll pick out some big highlights, of course, from the dates. You're starting off basically with the Ubisoft 4, which is 8 p.m. UK time. And with Ubisoft as well, by the way, this is what they promised. They said the main show will kick off 8 p.m. UK time, featuring big announcements and updates on some of Ubisoft's live titles and some surprises that you won't want to miss. Reportedly, it's going to be the likes of For Honor, Trackmania, The Crew, 2, Brawlhalla, Watch Dogs Legion, and more. And apparently a look at the mainline entry in Rainbow Six franchise, formerly known, of course, as Rainbow Six Quarantine, and new looks at Far Cry 6 and Riders Republic. Then after that as well, in terms of the big names, onto June the 13th, you've got the Xbox and Bethesda game showcase, which will be fascinating from a purely technical level, because obviously, they're together. Bethesda's won for the first time. That's 6 p.m. UK time. Then Square Enix just after that, at 8:15, and then you obviously got the Nintendo Treehouse Live on the 15th, PC gaming show on the 13th. Nothing on the 14th, by the way, unless I've missed something out there, but as far as I can see, nothing on the 14th.
Dringo's going to swoop in with his conference on that day.
Dreamfest. Gamesindustry.biz Dreamfest. But what are you expecting as well, Dringo, from Xbox and Bethesda? Because this is I'm really intrigued by this one personally on another level, because obviously there's so much promise there, and it does feel like a big chance. I wonder if Xbox are going to just put out all their cards on the table. They of course won't. I mean, but there's a lot of questions around obviously that merger and all that kind of stuff, and what we're going to see from it, how they're going to present it, and all that kind of stuff. And will we see more from the likes of, I don't know, Everwild? Will we get another hint of Perfect Dark and all this kind of stuff? Do you think we'll see any big surprises from Xbox?
I think Xbox will have a good show. And the reason why I think, I said something on this podcast a while ago about Everwild and Fable and Perfect Dark and games like that being a long way away, which they are.
Yeah.
And I said that, Xbox will want to show that they do have stuff that's sooner. Yeah. And I think that's what we're going to see at E3. I'm not saying that we won't see those games. I don't think we will. We might see one, but I think the focus is going to be on stuff that we're going to see sooner. And when I say sooner, I don't necessarily mean this year, but within a reasonable time frame. And I think Bethesda's going to help them with that a lot, because they'll have a lot of games, they've got a lot of studios.
Well, they couldn't possibly announce games that are further out than the ones they've already announced.
Well, but I think there is questions. Like Xbox has smashed it, right? They've made an amazing console. They've got a brilliant value-driven service in Games Pass. They're doing wonderful backwards compatibility work. They're doing so well. The one thing they're failing on, and it's the most important thing, is games. And in terms of like releasing new big games,
quite important, yeah.
And it's the most important thing. It's the reason why PlayStation are messing up or having PR issues all over the place. But because they're hitting it out of the park with the games, it doesn't matter. And I think Xbox need to start delivering on that. I think there's an expectation for them. And I know there's Halo coming, but what have they got next year? What else have they got this year? I not only am I hoping that they'll show that at E3, I'm expecting that from E3 this year. I think Xbox are going to be. I think we'll probably see fewer events from Xbox this year. They did quite a few last year. I think we'll see fewer of them, and I think they'll aim to showcase as much as they can in this upcoming one. And they've got Bethesda, which is quite exciting. The only thing I'm interested in seeing, and I read a phrasing in a press release that suggests they wouldn't do, is whether or not we'll get those PlayStation exclusives in the Xbox presentation. Just that
definitely been there.
That tickles me a little bit. No, it's definitely.
It's still mad. I mean, we talked about this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's still mad that Deathloop is like one of the best games this year, and it's not on Xbox.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's just, I mean, it reminds me a little bit, although it's obviously not quite as extreme as it was with Rare. Like, 'cause I remember when Microsoft bought Rare, and the first games they released were Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube, and there was something else for the Game Boy Advance, and it was just, took a while before they actually became an Xbox studio. But they'll get there.
Look, I mean, this is the bit I'm interested in, man. So I do agree, broadly speaking, that they'll show something. What is it you think they'll show? Like, I'm just genuinely curious. I mean, I love wild predictions because I find it fun as a game in general. Is there anything you're expecting to see that any surprises, mild surprises you're expecting?
Well, I mean, most of it's already leaked by now. I mean, obviously we'll get to that, but I mean, the issue that you have this year that you don't have in previous years is that a lot of the media are involved, in a kind of digital sense. So the content's getting shared ahead of time, which is good, but inevitably that does lead to too many people with the information, and it finds a way to get out there. So I'm hoping there are some surprises left. I mean, Nintendo stuff doesn't usually leak, although I think their previous direct actually went on Reddit a couple of hours before, which was killed it a little bit.
The thing with Nintendo leaks, though, is that everyone leaks them, and they've all like. There's always that one person that went, "Oh, he had it right," after the event,
because there's so much bullshit like around the legit ones that. It kind of like
they bury the
right? Yeah,
they bury the truth in a load of bollocks.
A billion monkeys in a room will eventually type out on Nintendo Direct. Is that what you're saying? Basically, eventually they will do, I reckon.
So yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, there's a lot of content around, right? I mean, Jeff Keighley's got a 2-hour show to fill. I mean, Nintendo and Square and Ubisoft have got shows to fill. So you would hope that there will be some decent surprises in there. I mean, Ubisoft. Just yesterday, has promised some surprises. I mean, some of the wording they used, I can't remember exactly, but it was like stuff you don't want to miss. Basically.
Yeah. I do hope to get. The thing is with Ubisoft is there's loads of reasons why I have. Ubisoft doesn't quite excite me like it used to, and I think it's because they used to. For me, I used to think them were the wholesome one of the exciting publisher of the games, and I think they've had a bit of a reputation hit. Well, they have had a massive reputation hit.
Yeah.
So I'm never quite as excited as I used to be for Ubisoft. But even then, like, I miss the old Ubisoft. So you go to their events and they do something bonkers. Like, it's increasingly become those big hitting games. I get it. I hope Ubisoft throw me a Rabbids. Or a just something.
I want Shigeru Miyamoto with a gun on his arm.
Yeah,
I want that. Like, who doesn't want that?
I want somebody playing like laser tag on stage. Like, I want that kind of nonsense.
It's a good shout. That is. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Rabbids. I mean, it's been a good couple of years now. How many years has it been since the first
sequel
one?
4.
Or some kind of like pro remastered version? Or,
they haven't released a game for X years. Ubisoft, is it Milan?
They did. It came out in the year of the Switch, so it came out in July 2017, and then they did the Donkey Kong.
So that long ago.
Yeah, they did the Donkey Kong expansion a year later. So it's been in development for a while. Well, whatever it is they're doing, I'm assuming.
How did that sell, by the way? Did it sell quite well?
It was. I think it's still. I know it's a real weird thing to call it the biggest selling third-party game on Switch when it's. And I'm pretty sure Minecraft.
For some weird reason, Ubisoft don't want to talk about the numbers on that. I don't know if there's a some sort of contract situation, but it sold really well. Yeah.
It's a good game. Well. It was a really good game. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I ever completed it. I got very close to the end, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I think I got distracted by something in life, but I would love a sequel to that.
I'm more excited about that than a 2K than a Firaxis Avengers game.
I'm bang up for that.
Yeah, same.
I don't get me wrong. I love Firaxis. I do. I think it's I always found with comic book games, and I had the same with the Avengers game. Like, I love Spider-Man, I love Batman because they've got that atmosphere and stuff. I always find Avengers is just a bit too American for me.
I'm gonna have to stop you because that's for later on in the show.
Yeah, stop talking about it.
Stop it. We'll get there eventually. Nintendo. I want to go back to Nintendo a little bit. I mean, it feels. I mean, surely we're ready for Breath of the Wild 2, Andy. Like, surely this is going to be the Treehouse event. If not, what is the Treehouse going to be themed on? Because Nintendo love that big theme.
You've got to expect Zelda, right? I mean, it's been, especially if the Switch Pro is coming around E3, then you would expect that is the perfect game that you want to showcase on that hardware. Like we've had this conversation before that when Nintendo does a hardware revision, they want to sell it to the core fans, right? So you can expect core games if they are doing that. I would not be surprised if there's a Metroid of some sort, because that's the sort of game that would move the dial on making people pick up a more expensive Switch. Dringo, you're like getting all tetchy, mate.
Yeah, I know. I can see the.
No, I know. I actually hope you're right. Metroid for starters is a tiny franchise. Like, I know it's like everyone on Twitter gets very excited about it.
It's true, but that is, if you want to get the most engaged people to pick it up, right? That's what you release. You release a Metroid.
To put it in context, Breath of the Wild has sold more copies on its own than every single Metroid game combined. Like,
sure,
but I understand what you're saying.
Are those people going to give a shit about buying a new 400 quid Switch?
This is what I'm talking about, because
I would.
Every single person who likes Metroid is going to go and queue around a block and buy 400.
Oh, yeah, all 1 million.
Even if it is a relatively tiny. Yeah, well, yeah. How many are they literally going to make?
Well, more than 1 million.
How much can we expect them to realistically get out, like in the time span? If it's coming out in September.
They released 3 million Switches in the first 3 weeks of the console when it launched. But regardless, it was like...
but that was when it was launched, right? They didn't have to sell different Switches before.
Nintendo were planning to sell 25 million consoles this year. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Regardless,
I'm loving this.
They will be, 10 million, I think, probably by the end of their financial year. But the thing, the reason why I'm like, I'm obsessed with Nintendo's release strategy, right? And if they've got Breath of the Wild to show properly, right? If there's a trailer at the end, here's another tease, absolutely. But if they're going to show it properly, it's all they'll show, right? They might tease a couple, and then the Treehouse suggestion that actually there's going to show more than that. But they did it with Smash Brothers, did it with Mario Odyssey. Like, there were little other announcements in there, but they basically went, this is all we're showing. If they've got Metroid, they're probably going to focus on that, because if they've got Zelda, they'll probably focus on. I don't know if they do both. I guess it's whether or not it's a Breath of the Wild sort of, here's a little bit, and then here we're going to show more in August, September.
A trilogy remaster collection, though, like, the Metroid, that surely would be one they could drop in a direct and not have to pull to pieces in a treehouse. So they could do it a little bit, I guess, but that feels like one for me.
But the reason why I'm putting faces is I genuinely don't know. Like, you can, I'd be surprised if Metroid Prime and Zelda are there. If they're both there, they've just done the biggest direct they've ever done. But I'd be surprised if they're both in there, simply because of recent history.
I mean, it's a 40-minute direct, right? So it's the same length as all their previous ones. So you could assume that you're going to get an equivalent amount of content. I mean, they've got a 2-hour treehouse afterwards. That's not necessarily first-party stuff, because when we were working on the second ukulele, we were on that as well. So, I mean, I'm thinking about timing-wise. I mean, they have to talk about Zelda stuff for the 35th anniversary, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So there'll be a Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword will be in it. There'll be a big 4 minutes of Mario Golf, surely. Surely there'll be 4 minutes of that, because that's coming out after, isn't it? I think it's coming out after,
Zelda and Mario Golf are both in June, I think.
Yeah, Zelda's in the beginning of July. But yeah, they're close. They're close to launch.
Sorry.
Yeah, but they'll definitely mention during the direct, surely.
Yeah, but I think you're talking 30 seconds sort of referencing.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, because they've done a lot of Skyward Sword showing. They've shown the hardware. They'll remind people it's coming.
They'll probably talk about Monster Hunter stories.
Yes,
is it? Monster Hunter stories. They'll probably talk about that.
But they tend to.
I mean, what they fill a 40 minutes with a direct in, right, is not necessarily what they're going to be play. I mean, remember they're not doing a physical event, right? I mean, they'll play some games in Treehouse, but I don't think they're going to be playing like necessarily Breath of the Wild. Yeah, maybe they will. If there are, you're right. Then it'll be the only game they play.
Yeah, I think
fair enough.
I think though, what I'm interested, the reason Nintendo's E3s almost always, like even throughout the history, with the exception of the time they had nothing to show, which was the year before the Switch launched, it's almost always the games that are going to launch at Christmas. Right? Smash Bros.
They got two Pokemon games as well.
Yeah, Pokemon though at E3 they do tend to just shove that into the treehouse. That's something they tend to do because Pokemon Company does a pre-event tease and they shove it in the treehouse. And I've seen that Nintendo change their strategies all the time. I'm just purely basing this on what they've done in the past. And so I wonder if Breath of the Wild is out in March, I don't know how much it might be shown. I hope it's shown, but I don't know if it'll be shown extensively. If it's Donkey Kong, that the rumored Donkey Kong game, maybe it's a Zelda collection. This is the point. Like I don't know, and I'm actually quite excited about that.
The Donkey Kong thing's a big one, isn't it? Because it's 40th year anniversary. I know there's been mentions, some big mentions of it recently. I guess, are we going to see anything from Mario Kart? Like anything, because obviously, I mean, they don't need to. Obviously, I mean, they probably won't. It would be my guess because it's still selling like hotcakes, isn't it? But that's. I think I'm wishful thinking now with Mario Kart. That would be absolutely wonderful. But we're not.
I'm expecting more Zelda stuff. I'm expecting Metroid of some kind. And not much else.
So no DK, no Mario Kart.
That's what I'm expecting. I mean, the other stuff is sort of like roll of dice, right? I mean,
yeah.
I'm expecting more Zelda stuff, and I'm expecting some sort of Metroid.
Yeah, maybe. If somebody said to me it's another Mercury Steam Metroid game or something, I'd be like, oh yeah.
When I say some sort of Metroid, I mean another 2D game, a HD remaster collection, or maybe a teaser for 4. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. What are you expecting from this Eidos Montreal Guardians of the Galaxy game, Dringo? Because obviously that's pretty much more or less not confirmed, but kind of is confirmed.
Well, yeah, I know that is definitely. It's not that I'm particularly more reliable than Schreier, but it's not so particularly.
I've just had my E3 confirmation confirmed. Registration confirmed. Which is good. Maybe they'll let me into the vault where I can watch Dringo all day. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
Guardians of the Galaxy's there. I'm not that excited about it because the thing is, I know it's Eidos Montreal who are.
We've seen this go wrong before, right? I mean, we've seen the Avengers game. Okay, some people enjoy that game. It's not exciting though, is it? Right? I mean, we saw how that turned out. At the time, it was is it fair to say it was a pretty sexy collaboration when they announced it? Like the idea that, they could do a proper, Marvel game here. I mean, some developers have done wonders with licenses before, but I think it's fair to say it turned out a little bit underwhelming in terms of the type of game they created. Yeah. So that takes some of the sting off of this. And also, the sort of people who listen to this podcast and read our website, they don't want Eidos Montreal working on a bloody Marvel game, do they? We want more Deus Ex.
I think for me, I had a certain and I told you before, I'm not that into. I like the MCU. I'd rather Crystal Dynamics made a Tomb Raider game than an Avengers game.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
exactly.
And so the fact that they made an Avengers game made me think, oh, it'll be good to see a sort of superhero Tomb Raider, and that's not what we got. And I was disappointed. And here, Eidos Montreal, their last game was Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is fine. But I don't have as much excitement about them working on a Marvel. I had more excitement about Crystal Dynamics. And
I'm with Chris. I'd rather they worked on a new Thief game. I genuinely would. I'd rather that, or like even going back to Deus Ex or whatever. But
those two games flopped so bad. The last Deus Ex and Thief. I mean,
yeah, it's a shame because I really like both IPs. Genuinely, I'm not expecting much from this. I still think, unfortunately, the absolute saturation of the familiarity of the faces of those characters is they have to be exceptional to stand a chance. And I still believe that if Marvel's Avengers come out with the licenses of the characters, which is never going to happen because it's too expensive, it would have done miles better because.
Yeah, all based on
or
based on an IP or a comic book IP that, like, the reason why Spider-Man works for Insomniac, because Spider-Man's changed faces so many times
exactly
that it's
like
just
4 times.
It's just it's the character, it's the superhero people are interested. It doesn't matter if it's a new person. Same with Batman. And and I think that as soon but Guardians of the Galaxy to most people is a movie. And Avengers is a movie
Pratt as well,
yeah,
and it's Robert Downey Jr. and it's the other dude Hemsworth, and it's all those people, isn't it? Like that's the problem. They associate those people with the characters as much as they are now. And like you're right about Spider-Man. I remember
you only have to pay out for one license for Guardians of the Galaxy. To be fair, surely you just pay for Chris Pratt, and then the other guys Raccoon.
It's Bradley Walsh, it's Bradley Cooper, isn't it? That's the thing. It's Bradley Cooper. Everyone forgets he's actually a very.
You've got to get Vin Diesel for Groot.
After watching Army of the Dead, Dave Bautista should be a lot cheaper now because that was a terrible film. Sorry, Mr. Bautista.
Going aside, have you seen the film where he blows up the bowling ground?
No.
I'm a West Ham fan for people who don't know listening. So
is that the London's thingy?
When we moved stadiums to the Olympic Stadium in London, they let this film company film a movie in our stadium before we knocked it down and basically blow it up. It's called Final Score. It's a proper straight to. It's got Pierce Brosnan in it, and they like blow it up. Yeah, they kill like Tony Cotti in the film. I think Tony Cotti gets killed.
Tony Cotti killed by Dave Bautista
on Sky.
It's
like Sky Sports News, and they like come on screen and shoot Tony Cotti. But...
That sounds incredible. Why haven't I watched that before? It sounds absolutely. I'm all for low budget, terrible.
Eidos Montreal should get that license.
Yes, Final Score. If you're watching Eidos Montreal, sack off Tomb Raider.
No, it wouldn't be the same. They'd have some generic face instead of Dave Bautista.
I think they could afford Tony Cotti though. I'm going to be honest. I think they probably could. Maybe they couldn't. Either way, any final E3 comments, guys, before we move on from yourself? Are you all good? No.
Thanks for being kind with the schedule, everyone.
And thanks for giving him the pass and access and all that kind of stuff. Let's go on to Sony, because this one's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be polite, basically. It's caused, if you've been anywhere near Twitter or any form of social media, you've definitely seen this go down. I'm going to read this from over at videogameschronicle.com. Sony Interactive Entertainment has confirmed it will release Gran Turismo 7 and God of War Ragnarok for PlayStation 4 as well as PlayStation 5. PlayStation Studios boss Herman Hulst revealed plans to release the games for Sony's older console in a Q&A published on Wednesday. Asked how PS4 factors into PlayStation Studios' development vision, he said it is still a focus for future game creation, and quote, he said, "You can't build a community of over 110 million PS4 owners and then just walk away from it, right? I think that'd be bad news for fans of PS4 and frankly, not very good business. Where it makes sense to develop a title for both PS4 and PS5 for Horizon Forbidden West and next God of War, GT7, Gran Turismo 7 that is, we'll continue looking at that. And if PS4 owners want to play that game, then they can. If they want to go in and play the PS5 version, that game will be there for them. That being said, it's also very important to have showpieces for PS5, hence the development of Returnal and Ratchet and Clank that are exclusives to PS5. Gloves off on this one. Now, both of these guys have done contrasting opinion pieces. I'm sure everyone's got an opinion because everyone does have an opinion. It's the internet, of course they do. And it's basically the reason people are getting het up about this is because obviously the whole "we believe in generations" quote, which came out around the launch of the PS5, where it was implied. I don't know how much people believe this, but it was implied, and it certainly came across this way to me personally, that there'd be more focus on the next-gen consoles with less games going backwards towards PS4, basically, i.e. they can use more of the hardware and all that kind of stuff. I don't know who to start with this one, because I know you both got very strong opinions, obviously. I don't think you're both wrong for what it's worth, but go on, Dringo.
Well,
into
I
this, what you
mean,
said.
we have differing. I think our preferences are different, but our actual opinions aren't. They don't contradict each other. It's just that I don't think it's a bad thing. So with the whole believe in generations thing, I was because I interviewed Phil Spencer and Jim Ryan during this whole situation, and I think I probably made that situation a bit worse because Xbox made a big announcement about the fact they were going to be cross generation with all their games, which I think, for the record, good thing. And I said to Jim Ryan in my interview, and other people did it in their interviews with him, well, are you doing the same thing? And he went, no, we're not going to do the same thing. We're not doing that with all our games. We believe in generations, which is true, right? They've done it with 4 games already. There were almost 4 games already. They do believe in generations. It's just that didn't mean they weren't going to do this at all. But regardless, I think that's all interpretation, and people can get upset or angry, or they lied to us. They lied to us as if, I
mean, they also said they wanted to transition players to PS5 at a rate never seen before, right?
Well, yeah, and that was the initial quote for that was actually, again, in an interview I did.
It's all your quotes, mate. You can't even like throw that away. You can't. No.
But they did that in the. This is before pandemic, and I said during the pandemic, is that still the plan? And he said that's what still we're hoping to do. And I think he got to it. And although they have transitioned people to PS5 faster so far, it's not massively faster. And I think that's definitely changed stuff. But here's the thing, I don't actually disagree with Andy. Andy's, not to preempt his point, his opinion piece was very much about the PS5 can do things the PS4 can't. And if you're thinking about the PS4, when you're making your PS5 game, you will naturally go, well, we're not going to do that because we couldn't do that on PS4. Now, I don't disagree with that. There's a good chance there'll be some concessions made there. But I don't necessarily think that's a real big deal, mainly because in the last generation I've seen, like I watched an art video with Digital Foundry and the Ori and the Will of the Wisps developer Moon Studios, and about how they got that working on the Switch. They basically had to redevelop the game to get it working on Switch. That's actually happening quite a lot. They can cut stuff out. And I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about the game I'm playing at the minute, but I've played Returnal and Demon Souls. I'm not allowed. But I've sat there and I
don't know what it is now.
Your non-disclosure agreement.
Tell me off air.
But I've not really seen or played anything at the minute that's made me go, they couldn't have done that on PS4. Like, they couldn't have done it as well. Definitely not. But like loading screen here,
that doesn't prove the point wrong.
No. Sure, they're not doing it yet. Though.
No.
Because they've not been able to.
So I sat there. I've not seen that yet. And I suspect that God of War and Horizon and stuff started development in the middle of the PS4 generation, or a chunk of the way through. So there's certain things I've seen Doom Eternal on Switch. I've seen XCOM on smartphones. Like, I've seen this sort of transition. Now, I'm sure there are some concessions being made. I just don't necessarily think the Mark Cerny vision felt like a 10 years time.
All the games you're describing, it's not like stuff they launched across all these platforms, right? It's an existing game that they've spent ages making sure that they can compromise it elegantly for another platform. Like the example you used before was like Doom Eternal, right? Doom Eternal on Switch at places runs at 360p. I mean, we're all very kind, and we say, it's amazing that game runs on Switch, and it is. But I'd say it's an arena shooter in tiny rooms. So it's probably a bit easier than a big open world epic, but also it's massively compromised for that platform. They have made it for the higher platforms, then they've compromised it for Switch.
Yeah, I expect that to happen this time around.
In a Cyberpunk 2077 world, a post Cyberpunk world, I do not believe that Sony's going to go, tell you what, make it amazing for PS5 and then we'll make it run like shit on PS4.
I do believe it, because
they still haven't relisted that game on the PlayStation Store. I do not believe that they're going to go, look, if it just chugs at 20 frames, it's all right. It's a PS5 game, right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's going to run great on PS4, and then the PS5 games are going to run at 60, just like they've already said with Horizon.
Yeah,
Horizon runs at 60 frames a second at 4K, so it's not pushing it very hard.
I don't think it's going to be as buggy as Cyberpunk, to be clear. I just don't think. I think the God of War team are making this game for PS5. They're probably outsourcing the PS4 port, right? And it's that's what I think will happen. But regardless, this is not really my point. Like it's not my point either. So to go back to what Dringo's saying, we both I kind of agree with most of what he says as well. Our opinion pieces are kind of like two sides of the same coin, really.
I mean, I've actually had people like messaging me this week saying, "Oh, you're talking a load of shit. You should read this piece by Chris Dring on GI.biz." But I've also had a lot.
That was me, by the way. It's,
I've also been pleasantly surprised. Actually, I don't usually write opinion pieces, but this kind of riled me up a little bit. This news this week, and I felt that I should say something. And I was kind of surprised by the reaction. There was quite a lot of people who said, like, bang on, well done. And obviously there's a lot of people who, disagreed and had constructive criticism, and some who had less constructive criticism. But the point I was trying to make is, yes, like, you can downscale graphics all you want, right? I mean, there is a multi-platform game which are kind of designed to be scalable, right? And then there are exclusive games that take advantage of all the platform features. I mean, that's generally, to a rule, typically platform exclusive games make better use of their hardware, right? But it's not about graphics. It's about scale and scope and AI and the number of enemies on screen and features, the memory you can use. That's something that consumers don't generally think about much, is that you can only use so much memory, right? When they're making a game, we can't do this because there's not enough memory. Even just as simple as something as storage, right? If you're making a game on a hard drive system, so a PS4, you have to duplicate the assets to make it stream properly. So the example that Sony gave in their presentation last year, Mark Cerny's presentation, was that there's something like the same mailbox in Spider-Man is on the game file or the disc 400 times, because obviously a hard drive has to seek and find this information. So if they just had one mailbox on the game file, the hard drive would have to spin to find that mailbox every time you go around a mailbox. It makes the game load quicker and stream faster if they just duplicate the mailbox. So even as simple as that, just fundamentally, if you have to work in under that thinking, the game's going to be smaller. Because we can't have 800 mailboxes on the PS4 version because it's going to be a 200 gig game.
Well, yeah, don't take it out.
Sure,
but then that's a compromise. So
Gran Turismo
of the PS4 version,
Gran Turismo 7, I don't think that's a bad one, right? I mean, really, it will look less pretty, but a racing game, without being reductive, is a racing game. It's not going to be big open world and all the rest of it, I don't think, unless they're making a Horizon type thing. But for God of War, someone made a very good point in the Resetera thread about my piece, about God of War, that God of War is probably going to be the most affected game by working on a hard drive. That apparently Corey Barlog, the creative director, has talked about it a bit in the past, about how difficult it was to get it to stream, because that game doesn't have any load screens. I forgot about that on PS4. Yeah. So the game is designed on PS4 to be streaming the next level while you're playing it. So the environments are already small if you have to deal with a loading screen. They're even smaller. It's just a fact. Like, unless they're going to make two different games that are completely different. Like, I don't know if any other old bastards remember Splinter Cell Double Agent on Xbox. They released it as an Xbox 360 launch game and an original Xbox game, and they were called the same thing at the same art, but they were completely different games. So unless they're going to do that, it's going to be limited. And you know what, right? Is that everyone can tell me I'm wrong and that they're focusing on PS5 and they're going to make a different game. I bet you any money in 5 years' time when they're making God of War 3, they're going to be up there on stage going, yeah, we can do this now that we couldn't do on the last one because we were making it for PS4.
So I think you're wrong. I mean, the reason why I don't think it's as big a deal is that actually on GI.biz we had a running series with a company called Abstraction Games who do ports to Switch. It's one of the things especially. They talk about what they do to make these things work, and basically they redevelop the game. So you talked about it's about enemies on screen. Abstraction literally take enemies out of the game. That's what they do. They go into the game. They go, right, these amount of enemies won't work on Switch. So they take the PC version has X amount of foliage, and they just go, we have to remove that. So there might be some things that you talked about AI, and in fact maybe the dynamic weather in Gran Turismo 7 won't be possible on PS4, and there's certain things that might have impact. So I do believe naturally though we're going from one generation to another. I think these games probably started development. They didn't quite know what the PS5 was going to have in it and what's going to be capable of. It was being developed right up until
I would imagine the one thing they would have known would have been in it is an SSD. They would have been targeting
yes, but I know for
that's the conversation here.
As I know, the Sackboy game went through about 5 or 6 different PS5 iterations as the hardware changed, and that's the thing. So they started off when they planned it. They said we need to think about, and that's a different game. That started off as a PS4 game that became a PS5 game, but. That's again for a journey. But regardless of this, I still think, even with there being some concessions that maybe to the PS5 version, if there are, I still think it's the right call. And I'm not talking about sales business decision here. Everyone keeps going, oh, it's all about making money. Well, actually, I think it's the right thing to do in an industry that's become more obsessed with accessibility than ever. I mean, last year, PS4 had its most. This is my opinion, and it doesn't contradict Andy's. It's just a reason why I think this matters. Is that more people were playing PS4 last year than any other year. It was peak year for PS4, which is unheard of in a year before they launch a new console. Sales, The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima were like off the scale. I don't know about Dreams and stuff, but those games were huge. PS4 sales were down overall, but I think around 10 million consoles were sold in a final year of a PS4. It's like if they weren't competing with Xbox, I'm sure PlayStation would have gone, let's push back PS5 12 months, right? It was so. What you've got is loads and loads of people who are playing their PS4s, who are into the PS4, may have only just bought a PS4, and PlayStation. Herman says it. I can't leave those people behind. We will lose those customers from a business perspective, but it's also not great. I've just bought a PS4 and now I'm told I have to buy a PS5 to get all these other great games. Phil Spencer did a great quote, which I really loved.
What about the people who bought a PS5 and they've just been told that they shouldn't have bought it at all? They could have just sat with PS4.
Well, you said earlier
the minority. You don't think anyone bought a PS5 for GT7? Well, not necessarily, but they would have bought it. They definitely would have bought it on the back of the very long campaign of Sony, making the
I don't think
the
environment would have bought it for GT7 as well. I don't think it's
no.
No one can say that at launch the story wasn't, this is going to be a cut-off. Like, not necessarily full on, but it was like there were more quotes than just your interviews as well. I mean, people were asking Jim Ryan, why don't you port PS5 games to PS4? And so we're not interested in doing that. We believe in generations. We believe that it needs to be a cut-off and blah, 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 blah. Whether or not they were clever in how they worded it, whether or not they, clearly said, black or white, one way or the other, that is definitely the picture that was painted. So I think it's completely understandable that some people are pissed off about the way
I don't disagree. I mean,
I agree. Again, me and Dringo broadly agree with what we're saying, right? Of course, it's a good thing that they're going to keep supporting PS4. A lot of people who want PS5s can't get one right now for whatever reason, right? Whether it's because of the pandemic, some people lost their jobs, but they can't make enough of them, even if you have got the money. However, it's very disappointing how they've gone about it, right? I mean, they've hidden it in a throwaway line in the middle of an interview because they know it's going to go apeshit. They should have been more transparent about this up front. I mean, Dringo and I know that some of these games were always on PS4. I mean, I reported on Horizon 2 at the start of last year, and I said it started as PS4. I mean, at the time, I speculated that it would have been phased to PS5 because the people I spoke to, other than my main sources, were like, it seemed unbelievable that they'd be making a PS4 game from the Horizon sequel, right? But clearly I was wrong. It was still on PS4. But I find it, just from a completely personal opinion, I agree with everything that Dringo says, but from a personal opinion, if I was a normal, outside of the games media guy who bought a PS5, I'd be pretty pissed off that games
Can I just say
compromised.
that? Because that is me. I want to say, so you guys work in the industry and you've both got your views, but what I will say as someone, once again, who's just presents YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff, but has been an avid gamer all my lifetime, is the general consensus, and I've chatted to friends about this just casually as you do in live, the consensus was that people felt actually, and whether this was right or not, and whether we've been misled or not, the consensus was, we'll be getting the big proper next-gen push games on the PS5 because they're going to focus on that. Because I personally felt led to believe that. Now, admittedly, I would have bought it anyway. That's one thing I will say, because people like myself who went and bought the PS5 early, we are early adopters, so we go out and buy it kind of anyway. So I'm not going to pretend I wouldn't have been sat there and buying it. But there will be some person somewhere who bought it on the premise of thinking, actually, this is the place for the next-gen games. And yes, they are kind of next-gen games, but I kind of do agree that the games that 4 or 5 years from now are going to feel, in terms of scope and what they can do and all that stuff, vastly different to now. Because and I'm not saying you're wrong either, but I do honestly feel it was a little bit snidey. And I don't blame him for it. But
these aren't games coming out this year. These are games coming out next year.
Yeah.
You know, the PS5 is going to be 2.
There's two elements here. So the first bit, which is the idea that look, I played Spider-Man Miles Morales on PS4 the other week. It's PS5 is the game you want to play. It's also, you can see it from the sales, right? When Spider-Man Miles Morales came out, I actually was shocked at how low the sales were in the UK for Spider-Man Miles Morales. And I spoke to a few people and said, look, people don't want to play the PS4 version. Right? They don't want to play the last gen version. They want to play the new gen version. So this idea that people will be disappointed, I mean, they might be. They've got this in their head now. We've been talking about it extensively. That Gran Turismo 7 is going to be compromised because it's on PS4. But it's going to be faster. It's going to look nicer. It's going to be incredible. It's going to have dynamic weather. It's going to
Gran Turismo 7 is going to scale nicely, right? Yeah. I mean, a racing game is
that the point, though? Is that the point? Is it the point that people thought it? Because there was literally a screenshot saying a PS5 exclusive. How much that matters, I don't know. But people were basically told that it's going to be on the PS5, and they could have bought the console for that reason.
Yeah. I just think they're still going to get an amazing Gran Turismo 7 game, right? And this is. So although I understand that, I think it's over. But regardless, the bit that I think is most interesting actually is PlayStation's way of announcing this. Now, it is incredibly normal, right, for the history of the industry to say we're announcing a PS5. We've got a PS5 presentation. We're going to show games that are PS5 games. And they don't mention there's on PS4. They don't mention it's also on Xbox Series X. They don't mention it's also on PC. They don't mention that. It's a PS5 presentation and we're showing PS5 games. Now, that is an quite old way of thinking about it now. And the thing is, PlayStation, you could argue, PlayStation announced Gran Turismo 7 is coming out on PS4 well over a year before it launches. Or presumably, I'm assuming it's not going to launch in the first quarter. A year before it launches. So if you're sitting there and you're upset because Gran Turismo 7 is also on PS4, you've still got plenty of time to sell your PS5. There's only 8 million out there, and or you've got whatever. They've not announced. It's not like it was with. I'm a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fan. I went out and bought Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on PS4, and I said I wish it was coming to PS5 and X. I'd much rather buy it on that. There's 2 months later.
That line there, mate. Sell your PS5. That's almost like the Dom Matrix score of.
No. There's
a console for people who don't want cross-gen games.
No, but I'm actually agreeing. So I was actually agreeing in that. They haven't done it where they've announced they've got a War's coming out, or getting everyone telling them it's a PS5 game and then a week before saying it's coming to PS4 as well. They've done it a year in advance. So people now know, most of the console sales will happen in the next 12 months, not in the last 6. So people now know, and there were some people who didn't. But the other thing is that last year Xbox just told people, they also bet it in an interview, by the way, but they just told people last year these games are coming before the console launched. So people knew they didn't have to upgrade. And PlayStation didn't do that because obviously they didn't want to give people a reason not to upgrade. Now, that's normal historically, but actually, I think in the modern day where marketing and words of execs, I've never known executives' phrasings to be under such scrutiny as it is these days. You kind of can't get away with that. You have to be as transparent as possible.
We talked about this 10 years ago. People like me, you still get good access because you're in the business press. But editing a specialist website when I was on CVG 10 years ago, if I went to E3, I'd have 10 plus CEOs of, games publishers, EA, Sony, Microsoft, who I'd speak to, whereas you don't get access to them anymore unless you're, IGN, etc. Because their words are under so much scrutiny. We used to listen to financial calls and stuff 10 years ago, whereas now everyone does. Like it was like a secret thing 10 years ago.
It's their fault. They got to choose the words better if that's the case, because it's a bigger industry, so they will be under more scrutiny.
Can I just say as well, because it's a fair point, because there's been a few people cropping up about, well, how comes when Microsoft did this, the press weren't kind of chastising them. Well, I'd say that Microsoft have been, or the other way around, like kind of treating them differently. But I would say that Microsoft have been clear up front, and I'd say the biggest thing is that Microsoft don't have any games. Like Halo, there's still some people. Look, hey, people went mental about Halo when they showed it. Saying graphically it looked disappointing. People were saying get that game off of Xbox One. So there is that, but fundamentally there are no Xbox games that are like, oh really? That's coming out on Xbox One? The stuff that they've announced that's really far in the future, it's all Series X exclusive. So I don't actually think Microsoft have really had the same problem.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we talked about E3 earlier, and I am expecting, because I've sort of heard that we're going to see some games that will be out sooner. And I'm like, well, why didn't they announce those last year? And because last year they're talking about the Xbox Series X, so they showed games that were so far away that they know is Xbox Series X exclusives, whereas PlayStation didn't do that. I do think Xbox have been more transparent. I do think PlayStation...
Isn't the irony as well that obviously Sony planned to transition everyone to PS5 really quickly, but they've now found and create these exclusive games theoretically. But they've now found themselves in a situation where PS4 is still selling, so they're kind of having to, backtrack. And Microsoft's almost having the opposite problem. Like, isn't Xbox One like sort of everyone's just sort of like no one's really on Xbox One anymore?
Well, yeah,
or buying Xbox Ones. The
difference with Xbox is that it's really, I mean, we talk about it as a console. It's really a subscription platform, and if you've got 10 million subscribers, 15 million subscribers, I don't know how many are on Xbox One, but that's the majority of them are on Xbox One. You can't suddenly go, oh, by the way, all those new games, you got to get a PC or xCloud or Series X to play them, and because you lose the subscribers, right? They need to build that. So they've got a different game. They're playing a different game. They had to make all of their games available on Xbox One until they get to the point where the majority of subscribers are on their modern machines. Whereas PlayStation is a little different, but they've got this. It's a good opportunity for. I mean, from an industry perspective, this is the thing. Like, a lot of people don't talk about this. The console industry's declined. Right? We talk about how the games industry's grown, but if you count GameCube in this, because I try and leave Nintendo out of it just for a second. It's easier. In the PS2 and Xbox generation, something like 180 million consoles. And then you go to the 360 PS3 generation, and again, not counting Nintendo, 165 million. And this generation's lower again. Like, the number of people playing console games is declining, buying consoles is declining, and or staying flat if you want to be kind.
Has it reached its natural level now, if that makes sense? Because the initial hype of a certain video games are still relatively a new industry, is it, compared to film or whatever. So
there's this thing where if you're making console games, if you're a console game maker, and costs of games are going up rapidly, costs of making these consoles are going up, costs of marketing them are increasing, and you're actually selling to fewer consumers than you were 20 years ago. That's an economic problem, right? And that's why console game prices are now 70 quid. That's why they're all filled with microtransactions. So the idea is, if we can get to a stage where we're growing the console industry, the Wii almost did it, and then everyone got taken away by Apple. And so we've got this, but then the pandemic happened, and people, I mean, there was a moment in the pandemic where Wii remotes reappeared in the Amazon charts, right? Right? It was just because people still had their Wiis. They hadn't bought a console since the Wii, and they just went, "Well, get that out." And you saw the sales of the PS4 and the Xbox One, particularly in the first half of the year, and you saw the sales of the Switch, which was ludicrous. And so there's now this huge audience of people actually that may not have played a games console for years, or people that did buy a PS4 but then just left it in the gathered dust, and they suddenly dusted it off and brought it out again. Suddenly there's an audience for them to engage with and go, oh, hang on. And so there's this big question, this big thing in the industry, this big thing on gamesindustry.biz. How can the games industry keep all these people who have just come in through the pandemic keep playing games now that they can go outside again, now they can go to the pub? How are we going to keep them still turning on their console from time to time? And that is a question that the whole industry is trying to wrestle with. And that's one of the reasons why PlayStation supporting PS4 in the way that they are is so important, because they need to keep those gamers engaged with the PS4, so that one day in the future, next year after, they get a PS5 and the PS5 audience grows, which means the quality of the games can get bigger, blah, 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 blah. It's a very business answer to that. But that's another reason why it's so...
I agree. I still think fundamentally they were a little bit intentionally misleading. I mean, that's. I mean, if it matters or not, it doesn't matter, because, just be honest, I'm going to buy the games anyway. So I mean, I'm right there underneath their thumb, and there's nothing I can say or do to change that.
It's still disappointing that the games are going to be compromised.
Mate.
None of us can ever prove that.
It's like either.
Yeah, I guess you can.
So I think didn't Guerrilla say that they couldn't have you ride the bird machine in the first game because they couldn't stream the environments fast enough? So that's one thing you can look forward to not having. I mean, Mark Cerny last year said that creating games for consoles with hard drives can sabotage the game that the developer is trying to create.
Yeah, but it depends. I guess that quote. The reason why I'm being right is you don't know what they're planned to make, right? You know,
the primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom, he says. Yeah. And he talks about how game environments have been designed the same way for 20 years since he worked on Jak 2 for the PS2, hiding sight lines, with twisty stairways and 30-second elevator rides to hide the loading. And he says there's a whole subset of level design dedicated to this sort of work, but it's still a giant distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. I mean, even it's a double whammy, right? Because not only is he kind of like supporting my point here that I think these games are going to be compromised in some way, it's inevitable. But also he is highlighting he's not a Sony employee, but also he's the PlayStation architect. So that's Sony represents a U-turn from Sony. I mean, Sony wouldn't come out and say that now, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what they plan to do with God of War or Horizon, right? You know, it depends when they started working on that game in 2017, what they envisioned it as. If they envisioned
get a feeling.
Is the point not what they can't do now? Is the plan what they plan to what they can't do?
I do get a feeling that they're going to embarrass me somewhat. Yeah, I do. I'm fully expecting them at some point to go, well, here's 3 more PS5 exclusive games, 2 more Returnals, another Ratchet and Clank type game. Oh, okay. But it's them. That's why I've worded it in my piece. It's Sony's biggest games, right? God of War, Horizon, GT7
so
are their biggest games.
This is a point I forgot. So I was going to make this, actually. They're only going to focus on this. This is only going to happen with their biggest games. Like, I think Ratchet and Clank and Returnal could have worked on PS4. But the reason they're investing in getting those games on PS4 when they're about, I don't know how many they're going to sell. They're not going to do the 10, 15 million God of War's going to do. It just isn't worth it. God of War, Horizon, they're worth investing in a PS4 port. Whereas Returnal, Demon's Souls, not so much. And there will be lots of games like that, I suspect, being announced in the future. I think, but it's always going to be, I think it will be the biggest one. So, because otherwise, look at Spider-Man. Miles Morales sales, like 70% of it's on PS5. But it's a big enough game that it still makes loads of money on PS4.
I'm going to be the parent now and put you both in the corner anyway, because we could go on forever and ever about this. But one thing that won't be taking advantage of the PS5's power probably is going to be Balan Wonderland, unfortunately. This is quite a sad story, actually. Yeah, so Yuji Naka, the co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, appears to have left Square Enix following the disappointing release of Balan Wonderworld. It emerged overnight that Naka has updated both his public Facebook and LinkedIn pages to show his employment at the Final Fantasy publisher as having ended on April the 30th. Naka has formed a new studio within Square, Balan Company for the creation. Formed a new studio within Square, Balan Company for the creation of Wonderworld, which was comprised of a collection of veteran developers, including Naoto Yoshima, the artist who created the original designs for Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not clear what Naka's potential departure means for Balan Company, but VGC has asked Square Enix for comment on the story. It goes on to say in the story over in Video Game Chronicle that Balan Wonderworld, unfortunately, was released to overwhelmingly negative reviews, with Metacritic score currently ranging from 36 to 51, and commercially the title appears to be just disappointing. In the UK, the game didn't even manage to break the top 40 box game debuts in its week, and in Japan it had a similarly poor debut, selling fewer than 2,100 copies in its first week. Not good, unfortunately. Is there any surprise in this news for you guys? Not when
you look at the sales. I mean, that's the killer. I mean, this is not a fun story. I mean, I don't like seeing. I mean, I would have preferred that this game was a success and that they get to make more, and Yuji Naka can work at, with some big budgets again. I mean, when they first announced this game, I was excited until they showed the gameplay. But when they big colourful game, these two guys back together, the character artist behind Sonic as well. First time they've worked together for 20 years. My speculation is, I get the feeling that he's sort of been, they haven't just worked out that it's rubbish when they release it, right? The game felt undercooked, like we so many bad games do, that it could have done with some more time. I mean, I don't get why it seems that all their budget has gone on these wonderful CGI cutscenes, and the game looks like it was made by a student team. It is a very poor game, but also game creation has changed now, right? And if you look at Yuji Naka's track record going back 20 years, he's been struggling, and games have changed in that time. I mean, obviously he had some of my favorite games of all time he worked on in the 90s and early 2000s, like Phantasy Star Online, and obviously the early Sonic games, Samba de Amigo, stuff like that. But in those days, you would have been working in really small teams of like 10 guys, where it was easier to manage and the job was fundamentally different. I mean, now when you're working with 100 guys, you've got to be a producer as well as a game director, and you've got to wear all these different hats. You've got to know where your time and your resources are going, and that's sort of maybe falls into what I'm saying, where it's like it seems like they've got these wonderful CGI cutscenes, and the game was sort of like, oh crap, we need to make that. Yeah.
So Balan Company is a really weird company, right? It's not actually a game studio, right? I mean, it is, but it's they refer to it like a circus troupe. And the idea is they've got, that's honestly how they describe it. They describe it as so what they've got is they've got a group, they've got one or two people, in this case, Yuji, basically him, and he brings in people. The idea was, he'd bring in like music and artists and bring these combines together to create a sort of a spectacle. And that was the idea. They had this carnival idea behind it. I did an interview with them. They explained this to me. I never actually ran it, but it was just, that was the vision behind it. And it's quite a unique vision. Clearly doesn't work. And I think it's just like bringing in loads of different voices and then not somehow making that work together. I think that sort of sums up what's gone wrong here. There's like Andy talks about the CG trailers. I not played the game. I've heard it's bad. If the CG trailers are amazing, it's probably because it's made by someone else, right? It's probably that bit's great and that bit's rubbish because this was done by this team over here and this bit was done by this. It's sort of done by bits and bits of people. And I think I suspect what's happened is this was their first effort. It's rubbish. Didn't sell anything. Outriders came out a week later, another Square Enix game that did bananas, right? It did super well, and they've gone, well, is it worth us investing in the next? They don't need. It's not as if anyone, apart from Yuji Naka, it's not as if anyone's actually really going to lose their jobs. They're all contractors and freelancers anyway. So I suspect it's just a case of, well, that one didn't work, we won't do it again. And I mean, it really didn't work. Like, ignore the critical reception. Commercially, I've not seen a flop like it.
Full price as well. I'm pretty certain it was like $70 game on it as well. Like, wasn't it something like that? It was really expensive.
Maybe like $40, something like that. I mean,
how was it?
To me, it screams of a game that's had to be thrown together. That they've not got the time, they haven't got the budget. I mean, as someone who has worked on a platformer that was thrown together, in a year and a half on a Kickstarter budget, that's what it looks like to me. But it just seems that maybe they didn't prioritize the right areas because, I mean, say for example, the biggest issue I have with the game is that the movement feels like a student game. It's not fun to move. I mean, it's a platform game. The most important thing in a platform game is the movement, and that it's fun to move. And then everything else, like say Yooka-Laylee, what we worked on. That's the first thing we spent months and months working on. The character's fun to move. They've got a look, and that comes from how they look and also how it feels with the controls. So you'd have the two guys, the programmer and the animator working together to make them fun to move. We just have a sandbox, right? For months and months and months we had a sandbox and the characters fun to move. So we invested all of our time in the characters and then we had less time to invest in the world, where it looks like they've possibly gone in the other direction because they've got quite a lot of levels, and they've got is it like something stupid, like almost 100 different characters that you can kind of take control of.
The same as well, whereas, I can tell, basically.
I mean, in game development, right, everything is easy in hindsight. It's important to note that. It's really easy for us to say at the end and go, oh, we should have done this. But at the time, they're kind of figuring out as they go along. But, yeah, you've got to need 60, 70 characters to turn into instead of 10 good ones and then make everything else better.
You've got to get that movement right. I remember, Yooka-Laylee, I actually really liked the first Yooka-Laylee. I know it wasn't a 10 out of 10, but I thought it was pretty good. But the moment I knew I was going to like it, regardless of how the world goes and stuff, was the moment I think I played it in a Yuki, which is I played it in the press event, and I pressed the buttons which would have created the Talon Trot move in Banjo-Kazooie, which is my favourite move in Banjo-Kazooie, which is just the way, and it's the one you and Laylee's on top of the thing and spirals, and I sat there thinking, that feels good. As soon as I felt that felt good, I knew I was going to like that game. And that is the fundamental thing you have to get right in the platformer. You have to get that bit right.
I mean, even just aesthetically, the way the Balan little legs moved, it looked a bit weird to me. It never felt right. Just looking, unfortunately, it's a shame because obviously you don't want to see anyone fail. But I guess it's a relatively cautionary tale. Where does he go from here, Yuji Naka? Now,
he's had his own company for a while called Prope. I don't know if anyone remembers, but he made a game called Let's Tap.
The box game.
You got a box as an accessory. Cardboard box. So you put the Wii remote on top of it, and then you play it by sort of tapping, and then the Wii remote would feel the kind of the movement. I don't know. He's going to be working on smaller games, and I mean, it's difficult because there's plenty of stories about him being a bit difficult to work with. I remember famously Peter Moore, who was the head of Sega US during the Dreamcast days, that really doesn't like him. Has got some bad stories to say about how they clashed. But whenever I've met Yuji Naka, nice guy. I mean, obviously we don't speak the same language, so he's got nice mannerisms. But I mean, I don't like to see this. I mean, obviously we wanted this to be a success. No one wanted this guy to flop, right? We wanted this game to be great, and then him to get on to go and do more. Because the really sad thing is the interview he gave with IGN last year, where he said, "This is my last chance." Like, Square Enix don't usually do these sorts of games, and the president has told me this is it.
So I'm gonna say, like, we as an industry, I think we as just generally, we treat failure like that's it. They're rubbish now. Like it's like their footballers have just got too old and they've lost a yard of pace. We all learn from mistakes. I actually sometimes think you're better off giving it a studio that almost got it right but missed the mark. I think is better than a studio that totally missed the mark, or a studio. They learn, right? We learn and develop and get better, and we learn more through failure than we do through success. And so, I hope he finds a new home, and I hope he finds a new game, because I would love to see what he does, because it will be better than what he's just done, because he won't make the same mistakes, and that's true of all of us. So I hope he.
And if there's any genre where a shit game can survive, it's the platforming genre. Lots of people love a shit platformer. I bet you anything in years to come, people are going to be proper pushing for a new Balan Wonderworld. There might even be a fan project making Balan 2.
Where's Chris Scullion today? Where is he? Because I'm sure he'd be pushing for it somehow.
He's one of them. That was difficult when he reviewed that game, right? Because he gave it 2 out of 5, but it's one of those... Do you know what I mean? In certain genres, you enjoy them. He likes platform games. So he knows it's a 2, but he's like, actually, I quite enjoyed it because he overlooked all of the flaws, right? That was a difficult conversation. That was a difficult conversation when we were setting that out. But it's one of those where it's like, it's a 2, but he enjoyed it too. And there are people like that out there.
Yeah.
That I've seen. There are people who are like, this game's crap, but I had a good time.
I'm of that. I do it all the time when we bring up Sonic Team and stuff. I say I just want a new Billy Hatch and the Giant Egg, and loads of people say to me, Chris, that was shit. And I go, no, it wasn't. It was amazing. It's the greatest platform I've ever played. It wasn't, but yeah, I can see it.
Final news story of the day, and finally getting onto what we touched actually in the intro of this video, which feels about 4 years ago now actually. Publisher 2K is reportedly set to announce, not because the video hasn't been great and the podcast, it's obviously there's been lots of back and forth between these two here at it together. Publisher 2K is reportedly set to announce several games, including a Borderlands spin-off and a Marvel strategy game from the makers of XCOM. That's according to an alleged leaked game list first post on Reddit, verified by journalist Jason Schreier, and some details of which VGC's own sources can corroborate. According to that list, the Borderlands spin-off is called Wonderlands and stars not Balan Wonderworld, and stars mainstay character Tiny Tina. And a series spin-off was first claimed to be in development by Game Reactor last month. Then 2K parent Take-Two confirmed shortly that it published a new Gearbox franchise for April 2022. It's also claimed that the XCOM studio Firaxis is working on a new turn-based strategy game starring Marvel heroes. So yeah, guys, we're finally at that point of the video. Are you excited about an XCOM Marvel game, Mr. Christopher Dring, or not?
Well, I mean, I am, because Firaxis are brilliant, and I love XCOM's one of my favourite franchises. I'm disappointed it's not XCOM. I love XCOM so much, and I like Marvel. It's fine, but I'm just like, I'd rather it was XCOM.
2K did say that they're announcing several exciting projects this year, so maybe.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
maybe there's an XCOM as well.
They did release one last year, which was a bit of a weird one. But I really like XCOM, and this will be brilliant. To be clear, I love X, I love Civilization. Firaxis are one of the best studios out there, consistently brilliant, and I'm sure it'll be great. I just don't really care about Black Widow and Iron Man and Hulk and stuff. If it was a Batman term, I'd be all over it. If it was but it's fine. It's fine. It's not for me. Same with Borderlands. I'm not a big fan of Borderlands either. It's not really for me. I think it's the big franchises. They'll do really well. And you know what? This might turn out to be Firaxis' most successful game. I mean, Civilization's a huge hit, but this takes them into a more mainstream audience that they've had a very hardcore audience, and this might make them a little bit more palatable to people that haven't discovered the joys of their games. So
looking forward to swinging across a little grid, Andy was as Spider-Man, and then jumping down as Thor and using your hammer and all that kind of stuff. Are you an XCOM fan?
I love XCOM.
Very cool.
I'm exactly the same boat. I love XCOM. Not so much into Marvel, but I can see how actually that could be quite a cool combination. Like if you,
but Spider-Man can't die.
But maybe if they kept all the elements of XCOM, I mean, you've got to keep permadeath, man. You just bring in, like, if Hulk dies, you bring in She-Hulk or something like that, right? But obviously you can imagine if they had really unique abilities, that would bring a different dynamic to what you had in XCOM, possibly, where you're customizing them, but basically they're obviously not that drastically different. But you can imagine how, oh crap, I need a Hulk in this scenario and Spider-Man in this scenario. So I think it could be cool. It
naturally works, I think, in terms of the abilities. It clearly naturally lends itself because they all had their unique abilities. So,
and Mario Rabbids is a bit like that, though, because Mario Rabbids is an XCOM game that's actually more of a puzzle game, really. It's about how do you get through this level using these characters or have unique abilities and stuff like that. So I like that. It's not quite XCOM, but I like that.
I suspected me more like that personally. I would, but given the audience as well, I'm not expecting it to be quite. You want it to be relatively, a turn-based strategy friendly. Yeah. Surely, because I can't imagine. Maybe not. Maybe it's going to be a bunch of 7-year-olds going, I don't understand this.
Maybe this is my first XCOM. In which case, fair enough.
My first XCOM. Maybe that's what they can. I don't know how they could list it as. What do you reckon these other several exciting projects are? Probably. Do you reckon it's just another XCOM game, Andy? Anything in particular?
Yeah, it's going to be another XCOM, won't it? I mean,
so I missed this. These other exciting. Are they for Access or 2K?
That's Take-Two.
Take-Two,
this is what Take-Two said last month. Hold on, I'm scrolling through the story now. The studio will have several exciting projects this year. Will reveal several exciting projects this year.
Well, they've got the 31st Union, who's Michael Condry's studio. I've got a new IP.
Sorry, that is. This is specifically Firaxis.
Oh right, okay. Oh,
as a result, this is from Strauss Zelnick. As a result of the engagement from the past, as well as the success of XCOM Chimera Squad and XCOM 2 on Switch, Firaxis Games had one of its best years ever. We expect this growth to continue as the studio has several exciting projects in development that will be revealed this year.
Just give me Terror from the Deep.
In May.
Give me Terror from the Deep. That's what I want. Terror from the Deep. On underwater.
Are you a Borderlands boy, Andy? Are you a Borderlands guy?
No.
I'll be honest. I'm not either, unfortunately. So this is not really the Borderlands.
I like it. I like it. It's one of those games where if your mates aren't playing it, then
that's it.
I'm not playing it on my own.
Well, that's it for me. I played a little bit.
You need to squad up, right? I mean, I loved the original Borderlands.
I'm just I played a bit of 2 with a friend, and after that, I kind of enjoyed it, but I played it local as well, which is obviously a dying art form, local co-op these days.
Do you know what? Dringo can speak to this a bit. It's actually a lot of people don't realise just how massive Borderlands is.
Oh goodness, yeah. I mean, I remember when Borderlands came.
The film as well. Did you see the film? The little it's Kate
Blanchett's it's coming up, isn't it? But I just mean, even when I was doing when VGC kind of launched, and we were doing the press rounds with Borderlands 3, and I started looking into it. It's really staggering just how massive Borderlands 2 was.
I remember when Borderlands came out, the first one, and it came. I think it launched in October, and at the time it was the idea of like, oh, you send a new IP out in October, that's going to die. What I didn't envision is Take-Two just. It's. I think it's outside of the NBA and obviously Rockstar Games. It's like their biggest franchise.
Yeah, I think
it is absolutely huge. And the thing is, it got bigger and bigger. It was one of those games that just kept on selling. Borderlands 3 launched while Borderlands 2 was still in the most played charts. It is a massive IP and massive franchise. When that's the reason why Gearbox being bought by Embracer and everyone going, oh, that's interesting. Is like, because what does that mean in Borderlands? Losing Borderlands would be a big deal to Take-Two, and it's just like the game sold like, I think Borderlands 2, Borderlands 3. When did Borderlands 3 launch?
2019.
2019.
End of 2019.
By the end of the year, it hit 8 million copies. And you think that's how much grand. You think of God of War. We talk about God of War, about how it being huge. That was 10 million, right? And this was in like 6 months, less than that, 3 months. And it's just it is huge IP, a massive.
I was literally reading about the film earlier on today, and like it's been directed by Eli Roth, who's done things like Inglourious Basterds and Hostel and stuff like that. So that's a huge ring. And then the cast as well is absolutely insane. Like Kate Blanchett, Jack Black, Jamie Lee Curtis, Kevin Hart. It's a big budget film by the looks of it. So maybe that world's going to get bigger and bigger as well. So could be one of those ones that maybe we're all wrong and need to play more of it or something like that. I don't know. But either way, that brings us to the end of this episode of Off the Record. It's been opinionated, this one. It's been interesting. Definitely very much off the record is what I would say. Living up to the title in this one. Let us know, obviously, down in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, your opinion on the PS5 next gen U-turn, and of course, what you're looking forward to at E3 and all that kind of stuff. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well, and also give it a follow if you're listening over on the podcast provider of your choice. Mr. Chris Dring, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's been a delight as always. I love it.
And Andy, thank you for having me present these shows.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for giving me a job.
Guys, you're all absolutely awesome. Have a wonderful weekend, even you watching this right now. See you later, guys, and see you next week for another episode of VGC Off the Record.